As the night breathes slow and deep, let your thoughts drift, and let the stories of old take root in the quiet space between sleep and waking. The stars, like ancient whispers, weave their soft light across the dark expanse of the sky. And here, in this gentle pause, there is a tale of ancient gods and endless cycles, of prophecy and fate, and of a darkness that hung heavy over the land. If this story has brought you a moment of peace, let your support be known with a gentle click to subscribe, and more myths will come to find you. Tonight, we journey to the distant shores of ancient Ireland, where the earth trembles beneath the weight of gods and shadowed beings. This is the tale of Balor, the lord of the Fomorians, whose evil eye cast a dread upon the land. It is a tale from the mythological cycle, long before the mortal heroes walked the earth, when the winds were thick with ancient magic and the gods shaped the fate of all things. And so, as the wind stirs the sea and the waves whisper to the shore, the story begins. In the time when the heavens themselves were still young, and the earth was untouched by human hands, there were those who roamed the wilds between the worlds, beings of great power and terrible beauty, shaped not by the hand of man, but by the very fabric of the land, the sea and the sky. Among these beings, dark and dangerous, there was none more feared than Balor, the chief of the Fomorians. Balor's name was spoken only in the hushed tones of those who knew the fear his presence brought, for he was a being of such dreadful power that the very air seemed to change when he arrived. His eyes, deep as the ocean's heart, were said to hold the power to wither the world itself. The tales speak of the evil eye, that which was said to curse the land with death and shadow, and it was this eye that made Balor both revered and loathed, for it could bring down storms, crush armies, and lay waste to kingdoms. But such power, as all power does, carried with it its own darkness, and within this darkness was a prophecy, spoken long ago by those whose voices no longer echoed upon the earth. It was said that Balor, for all his might, would one day be undone, not by the strength of gods or men, but by the hand of one whose blood ran through his own veins. A grandson, the child of his daughter, would be the one to break him. And so, from the moment the prophecy was spoken, the winds of fate began to shift. The air grew heavy with the weight of what was to come. In the shadow of this prophecy, Balor's daughter Ethniu was hidden away, kept from the eyes of all for fear that the child she carried, her son, would bring about the end of his grandfather. She was cloistered in the wilds of the earth, far from the reach of the gods and the Fomorians alike, and there in secret she bore her son. The child, whose name would be Lu, was destined to be both the undoing of Balor and the saviour of the land, but such is the nature of fate. No matter how deep it is buried, no matter how carefully it is hidden, it will find its way to the light. And as the storm clouds gathered on the horizon, so too did the seeds of conflict begin to stir beneath the surface of the world. The winds that swept across the vast desolate shores whispered of things to come. Though the Fomorians and the Tuatha De Danann had long been separated by the veil of time and tide, the ancient forces stirred in the depths of the earth, beneath the surface of the sea. Even as Balor's dark presence loomed over Ireland like a shadow that would never lift, the time of the prophecy was drawing near. In the hidden places, where no mortal nor god could see, Ethniu gave birth to her son. The child's first breath was like a spark, a tiny flickering light in a world that had long been cloaked in shadow. His name, Lugh, would carry with it the brightness of 1,000 suns, a name that would one day be sung across the land by those who witnessed the shifting tides of fate. Yet even in the first moments of his life, Lugh was touched by the weight of prophecy. No joy rang from the birth, only the sorrow of inevitability. For the Fomorians, creatures born from the stormy depths of the sea, knew the power of bloodlines, and it was said that the child's destiny had been woven long before he drew his first breath. In the quiet stillness of that hidden place, a silent pact was made between the land, the sea, and the winds of fate. As the days passed, the shadow of Balor grew ever larger. His dark eye, ever watchful, sought to pierce the heavens and the earth, to find the child who would bring about his downfall. But the child was kept far from his reach, hidden from his sight, locked away from the terrible power of the evil eye. The winds of the sea, the waves that whispered on the shores, seemed to bend and stretch as if in warning. The lands themselves seemed to groan beneath the weight of the impending storm. Yet there, in the quiet places of the world, Lu grew. He was not merely a child born of flesh. He was a spark of light, a flame waiting to be kindled, a force of nature in human form. It was said that, even as a boy, his hands could shape the world, that he could create wonders with his touch and bend the elements with his will. The storm had not yet come, but the winds of change began to stir, soft at first, like the first whispers of a coming dawn. In the midst of this, another great force was gathering on the horizon, the Tuatha De Danann, the fair folk, the children of the gods who had once ruled the earth. Their lands had been overtaken by the Fomorians long ago, their bright cities turned to ruins, their gods exiled to the edges of the world. Yet within their hearts burned the fire of resistance, the will to reclaim what had been lost. And now, with the birth of Lu, the time for their return was at hand. The Fomorians, however, were not blind to the stirrings of fate. In their darkened halls, within the hearts of their monstrous kings, there was a deep and terrible understanding of the forces at work. Balor, ever vigilant, felt the stirrings of the world around him, felt the ripples in the waters, heard the whisper of the winds. He knew the moment was coming, that the child of prophecy was growing, and with him, the storm. As the winds rose and the dark waters churned, the shadow of Balor seemed to stretch across the land like a great cloud, swallowing the light of the sun. The Fomorians, creatures of the sea, moved like shadows beneath the waves, their hunger and fury rising with the tides. And yet, in the quiet spaces, where the world was not yet lost to chaos, there was the faintest glimmer of hope. And so, as the storm gathered strength, so too did the light of Lu grow stronger. Though hidden, though secret, though bound by the heavy chains of fate, he would not remain so forever. The winds would carry his name, and the waves would crash upon the shores of Ireland, for the time of prophecy was near, and no being, neither mortal nor god, could stand in its path. The earth itself seemed to tremble as the days passed, each one carrying the weight of prophecy closer to its fulfillment. The seas whispered of a coming tempest, the winds carrying with them the sharp scent of salt and change. The balance of the world shifted, like a great stone poised upon the edge of a cliff. The gods, both bright and dark, felt the stirrings of fate, the unseen hand that guided their steps, pushing them towards inevitable conflict. The Fomorians, ever restless, gathered in their dark citadels along the jagged coasts, their eyes ever watchful for signs of the child, the one who would undo their reign. Balor, their mighty chief, stood above them all, his presence a shadow that stretched across the land. His evil eye, the source of his terrible power, was ever guarded, ever hidden, for its wrath could be unleashed only when he chose it, when his hand reached out from the depths of the storm to bring ruin. And yet, there were whispers in the deep, amongst the ancient stones of the earth, of the rise of the Tuatha De Danann, the fair ones who had once ruled the land with grace and light. They had been exiled to the farthest corners of the world, driven from their thrones by the tide of the Fomorians. But the time for exile had ended, and in the quiet recesses of the earth, a great stirring had begun. Lu, still hidden away from the sight of his grandfather, was growing. The spark of his potential, the light within him, could no longer be contained. He was a flame, a force waiting to be unleashed. The lands that had long known only the cold touch of the Fomorians were beginning to feel the warmth of his presence. The sea that had once been a border between order and chaos now trembled with the promise of a new dawn. It was then that the first whispers of war began to stir. The Tuatha De Danann, with all their might and all their skill, began to gather, rallying behind the banner of Lu. The forces of the Fomorians, sensing the coming storm, too began to prepare. The winds howled across the coastlines, carrying with them the thunder of an inevitable clash. The gods, the monsters, the ancient ones, all were drawn toward the coming conflict like moths to flame, for the time of reckoning had arrived. And as the forces of the Tuatha De Danann and the Fomorians converged, the land itself seemed to hold its breath. The sea stretched wide, its waves crashing against the cliffs in anticipation, as though it too knew what was to come. The skies darkened, clouds swirling and thickening above, a storm taking shape, and beneath the surface of the sea, the Fomorians prepared their ships, black jagged vessels that cut through the water like knives, their sails billowing like the wings of great beasts. The The Tuatha De Danann too had their own forces, though their ships were fair and gleaming, their warriors clad in shining armour. But even their might was not without cost, for they had long been exiled from the land, and many of their warriors had forgotten the taste of battle. And yet, as the storm clouds gathered, so did their resolve. The winds carried their banners high, and their hearts beat with the rhythm of the coming storm. It was on this fateful eve that the first clash came. The sea, once calm and serene, erupted into fury as the ships of the Fomorians met the shining vessels of the Tuatha De Danann. The clash of steel rang like thunder over the waves, the cries of battle echoing through the sky. The winds howled, whipping the sails, tearing the air itself. The heavens seemed to split open, and the earth groaned beneath the weight of the clash. And amidst the storm, amidst the chaos, stood Balor, his form towering, his presence like a great cloud that blotted out the sun. His eye, that terrible evil eye, was shut tight, for it could not be unleashed in such a time of turmoil. But there, in the thick of the battle, the whispers of the prophecy reached him. He could feel it in the air, the presence of the child who would undo him. His heart, black as the sea, twisted with the knowledge that his time was drawing near. Lug, though still hidden from view, could feel the stirrings of the battle, could feel the tide of destiny pulling him toward the inevitable. The forces of the Tuatha De Danann pressed forward, their swords flashing, their hearts filled with the fire of rebellion. And yet, even in the midst of such fury, there was something soft, something calm. The waves, though they roared with the fury of the gods, still held the faintest trace of peace. The winds, though they howled, still carried with them the scent of salt and the promise of renewal. For as the clash of armies echoed across the sea, the prophecy hung heavy in the air, waiting to be fulfilled. The birth of Lu, the rise of the Tuatha De Danann, the fall of Balor, all were part of the great cycle of fate that spun its web through the land. And as the battle raged, as the storm of war threatened to tear the world asunder, there was a quiet understanding that the end was only the beginning. The storm, like all things, would pass, and after the battle, after the thunder and the clash of steel, there would be a new dawn. The battle had stretched long into the night, and the sky, thick with storm, seemed to fold upon itself like a great dark cloak. The clash of the Fomorians and the Tuatha De Danann was no longer just a battle of armies. It was the very fabric of the world unravelling and reweaving itself in the image of fate. The wind carried the cries of war across the waves, a chorus of agony and defiance, as the two forces tore at one another beneath the heavy weight of the prophecy that loomed over them all. In the heart of the storm, amidst the frenzy of war, Balor remained unmoved. His towering form stood at the centre of the tempest, a silent figure shrouded in darkness as the waves crashed at his feet. His gaze, hidden behind his heavy lids, was locked in the calm before the storm. The evil eye, the source of his power, lay dormant, his hand held tight over it, as though it could not be unleashed until the moment it was needed most. For though the battle was fierce, though the sky itself raged with thunder, Balor knew that the time to reveal his eye would come soon enough. The child was near, and he could feel it. A pulse in the very air, a shift in the wind, the quiet stirring of fate's hand. Yet, as the storm broke and the battle raged on, something else began to stir in the distance. A soft glimmer, a flicker of light that cut through the darkness. It was a gentle radiance that contrasted sharply with the deep blackness of the storm, the light of Lu, the child of prophecy. He was not yet revealed in form, but his presence, like a whisper, stirred the winds. The light was within him, and with every breath he took it grew brighter. Far from the battle, Ethnu, his mother, could feel it, the quiet stirring of fate. She could sense her son growing, his strength filling the space between the worlds. Though she had hidden him away, shielded him from the wrath of Balor, there was no escaping the path that lay before them. The prophecy, long whispered in the halls of gods and men, was coming to pass. The child of the Fomorian's doom was near. And though Ethnu's heart was filled with both fear and hope, she knew that nothing could stop what was meant to be. As the tide of battle seemed to lean in favour of the Tuatha De Danann, there was a brief, unsettling stillness. The storm paused, as if the world itself were holding its breath. The moment had arrived. Balor, sensing the change, slowly lifted his hand from over his eye. The wind seemed to still in anticipation. The sea calmed, its roiling waves momentarily subdued. The very air grew thick with expectation, as though the universe itself were waiting for the terrible power of the evil eye to be unleashed. In that moment, the sky cracked open with a sharp thunder clap, the heavens themselves seeming to split asunder, and Balor's terrible eye opened. The force of it was like the breaking of the world, a great burst of light and darkness, a terrible unnatural force that blotted out the sun and threw the world into shadow. The earth trembled beneath its weight, and the winds screamed as if in agony. The waves that had once lapped gently against the shore now roared with fury, crashing against the cliffs, as though the very seas themselves sought to escape the power that radiated from Balor's gaze. The Fomorians, sensing their chief's power unleashed, surged forward with renewed strength, their monstrous forms clashing against the Tuatha De Danann like a tidal wave. Their hunger, their storm-like fury filled the air, and the land seemed to buckle beneath the weight of their force. But even as the battle raged, as the winds howled and the waves broke against the shore, there was something else in the air, a quiet hum, a promise of something to come. The storm of war was not yet over, and neither was the prophecy fulfilled. For even as Balor's evil eye blazed with all its might, a new light began to emerge from the chaos. It was faint at first, like the first glimmer of dawn creeping over the horizon, but it grew stronger, brighter, cutting through the darkness of the storm. The winds whispered of it, the waves parted for it, and as the great eye of Balor continued to cast its shadow upon the land, a single figure moved through the storm. Lu, the child of prophecy, was here. And as the storm thundered and the winds howled, Lu stepped into the fray, his presence like a radiant star cutting through the night. His hand, though young, grasped the sword of the gods, and his heart burned with the light of the future. His gaze, though gentle, was filled with the weight of the world, of gods and monsters, of prophecy and fate. It was as though time itself bent around him, as if the very fabric of the universe recognized the force that had arrived. And in that moment, amidst the storm, amidst the fury of battle, there was a soft pause, a deep breath, like the exhale of the world, as if everything held its breath, waiting for what would come next. For now, the child had come to face the eye, and so the clash of the ages began. The sea, once a realm of restless power and unrelenting chaos, now fell silent in the face of Lu's arrival. His light, gentle yet undeniable, spread through the storm like the first tendrils of dawn stretching across a darkened sky. The air trembled with anticipation, as if the very elements, from the smallest grain of sand to the tallest mountain, recognized the shift. The power of prophecy had come to pass, and all things, gods and monsters alike, felt the weight of what was to come. Luke stood amidst the wild, violent clash of the Fomorians and the Tuatha De Danann, his presence a contrast to the storm that raged around him. The sword in his hand was no ordinary blade. Forged in the heart of the heavens, it was a weapon of light, of creation, and of destruction. It gleamed with an ethereal glow, a flash of radiance against the dark backdrop of the battle. His every movement was an echo of the sun's rising, the promise of the day to come after the endless night. As the Fomorians pressed forward with their terrible might, their monstrous forms surging through the waves, the clash of steel rang out like thunder, filling the air with a terrible din. The Tuatha De Danann, fueled by the fire of resistance and the flickering hope of victory, fought back with equal ferocity. Their swords glittered in the storm's fierce light, their cries rising to meet the rage of the Fomorians. The battle was nothing less than the struggle for the soul of the earth itself, a contest between light and darkness, between the order of the gods and the chaos of the sea. But even in the midst of the battle, there was a quiet space where Lu moved, a place where the chaos seemed to pause, if only for a heartbeat. His eyes, calm and clear, scanned the storm-swept battlefield. The forces of the Fomorians, though vast and monstrous, seemed to falter as they met the light of Lu's gaze. His presence, though soft like the dawn, held a quiet power that spoke of inevitability. He was not merely a child. He was the manifestation of the future, the embodiment of the world's will to live. It was then that he met the gaze of Balor. The evil eye, still wide open, glowed with a dark fire, casting a shadow over all that it touched. The land, the sea, the sky. They all bowed beneath its weight, as if the world itself shrank away from the terrible power it commanded. And yet, in that moment, Lu did not flinch. He stood tall, his sword gleaming with the light of dawn, the force of his destiny pressing upon him like the weight of the stars. Balor's gaze locked with his, and the world held its breath. The very air trembled, as though the heavens themselves could not decide whether to rage or to remain still. There, in the heart of the storm, father and grandson stood across from one another, one bearing the light of the future, the other the shadow of the past. The winds which had howled so violently moments before softened. The waves which had crashed against the shore like furious beasts stilled. It was as though the earth itself had paused, waiting for the storm to reach its climax. For this moment, this inevitable clash between Balor and Lu was the fulcrum upon which the fate of all things would turn. It was a moment that had been prophesied, long before the world took its first breath, and then, with a quiet, almost imperceptible motion, Lugh stepped forward. His hand, steady and sure, gripped the hilt of his sword. His gaze never wavered from the terrible eye of his grandfather, even as the power of it sought to sear his soul. The world held its breath. In the space between them there was no sound, no crash of waves, no rattle of swords, no call of battle, only the stillness of fate. Then, as if in slow motion, Lu raised his sword. It caught the first light of the storm's breaking, gleaming with the promise of the dawn. He brought it down, swift and sure, cutting through the air like the first ray of the sun breaking through the clouds. Balor's evil eye flared in response, a terrible, unnatural burst of power that shook the earth itself. The storm, which had simmered in tension, broke in that moment, its rage returning in full force, as though it too were caught in the wake of that single strike. But it was too late. Lugh's sword met the mark. The blade of light struck Balor's gaze, shattering it in a burst of light so brilliant that the world seemed to pause for a heartbeat. The power of the evil eye, once so dominant, flickered and died, its terrible energy consumed by the radiant force of Lugh's strike. The ground beneath them trembled, the very sky seeming to shift, as if the balance of the world itself was realigning. And in that moment, Balor, once an invincible force of nature, fell silent. His towering form seemed to shrink, to fade away like the last remnants of a dream. His power, which had once been felt across the seas, across the land, across the very bones of the earth, was now nothing more than a fading echo, swallowed by the light that had risen from Lugh's blade. For the first time in eons, the storm of Balor's reign stilled. The forces of the Tuatha De Danann, emboldened by the fall of their enemy, surged forward with newfound strength. The Fomorians, without their leader, faltered. The sea, once a place of darkness and chaos, seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, the waves now calmer, gentler. And yet, amidst this great shift, Lu stood still, his sword held firmly in his hand, the light of the dawn still shining in his eyes. He knew that though one storm had passed, others would rise in its wake. The world, like the sea, was ever changing, and the light that he now carried would have to face new shadows. But for this moment the storm was over. The sea, once thick with the fury of battle, now lay still beneath the muted light of the breaking dawn. Its surface, calm and smooth, reflected the soft hues of the sky, as if the ocean itself had sighed and settled after the storm. The land, too, seemed to hold its breath, the winds having softened their restless howls. The jagged cliffs that had echoed with the crash of battle now stood silent, a quiet testament to the violence that had passed. Lugh stood amidst the stillness, his sword now resting at his side, its light no longer burning with the same intensity, but rather glowing softly like the first embers of a fire that has not yet gone cold. His heart, too, seemed to soften, as though the great weight of the moment had finally passed from him. The task set before him, to face his grandfather and bring an end to his reign of darkness, was done. And yet, in that quiet aftermath, there was no triumph, no grand victory. He had fulfilled the prophecy, yes, but at what cost? The Fomorians, whose monstrous shapes had once roamed the land like the very winds of chaos, now seemed to shrink. Without their chief, without the terrible power of Balor to guide them, they faltered, their monstrous cries now muffled, their strength waning. The Tuatha De Danann, though victorious, stood still, as though unsure of how to move forward. The battle, once so fierce, now seemed distant, like a memory that slipped through the fingers of time. And in this moment, there was a strange, peaceful quiet that filled the space between all things. Lug's gaze drifted across the field. The bodies of the fallen lay scattered upon the earth, those of the Fomorians, those of the Tuatha De Danann, both sides marked by the same inevitable fate. The world, in all its beauty and brutality, had borne witness to another clash of gods, and now, as the storm clouds parted and the sun broke free from the grip of the tempest, it seemed to be asking, what now? The prophecy had been fulfilled, but the world had not been saved in the way that heroes and songs might have foretold. Lug, standing amidst the ruins, could feel the weight of the ages pressing upon him, the legacy of those who had come before, and the uncertainty of what lay ahead. In the distance, a small bird flitted from one branch to another, its wings beating in a rhythmic, soothing pattern. It was a sound that seemed to fill the silence, bringing with it a sense of calm. The sea, too, now lapped gently at the shore, its waves rolling with the ease of a child's breath. The winds, though once fierce and full of storm, now moved lazily across the fields like a soft, warm sigh. And it was in this moment of stillness that Lug realized something. Even the greatest of battles, even the most powerful of prophecies, lead to nothing more than the quiet return of the earth to itself. The storm, like all storms, had passed, but the world, this world of gods and monsters, of light and darkness, was eternal. As the sun continued its slow rise, the land began to breathe again. The earth drank in the light, and the sea shimmered beneath the sky's soft glow. Love closed his eyes for a moment, allowing himself to feel the cool breeze on his face, the gentle whisper of the wind in his ears. There was peace here, peace, at last, after the storm. But even in that peace there was a knowing that the balance of the world, fragile and fleeting as it was, would not remain still forever. It was as the sea itself, a quiet, eternal ebb and flow of order and chaos, of light and dark. And as Luke stood there, the weight of prophecy no longer pressing upon him, he understood that the real battle was not one fought with sword or eye. It was a battle of time, of fate, of change. For even as Balor had fallen, so too would others rise in his place, for the world would continue its endless dance of creation and destruction. It was a truth as old as the sea, as constant as the tides. And so, with the light of the sun warming the earth beneath him, Luke turned away from the battlefield, his steps soft, his heart quiet. The world had been shaped by the storm, but it was the calm after the storm that would carry it forward. He walked away, not as a hero, but as a witness to the ever-turning wheel of fate. In the distance, the first rays of dawn touched the earth, soft and golden, as the winds began to shift once again, as if whispering of what was yet to come. The quiet after the storm lingered, settling like mist over the land, soft and heavy. The sun, now fully risen, bathed the earth in its gentle light, and the waves of the sea lapped against the shore in a rhythmic, soothing dance. Yet, beneath this calm, there was a pulse, a quiet beat of time, reminding the world that it was always in motion, always shifting. It was as though the earth itself was exhaling, releasing the tension of battle and the weight of fate. But even in that release, there was the faintest tremor of something new stirring. Lu, still walking away from the battlefield, felt the pull of the earth beneath his feet. He could not yet see it, but he could feel the undercurrent, the subtle movement of destiny, like the steady flow of the tides. Though the Fomorians had been defeated, and Balor's terrible eye had fallen silent, the world was far from still. It had simply shifted, like the quiet pause between waves. The Tuatha De Danann, those who had once ruled with grace and light, now stood in the aftermath of war, unsure of how to rebuild the world they had lost. Their lands, broken and scarred by centuries of Fomorian rule, would require more than just the light of Lu to heal. They would need the patience of the earth itself, the time it took for broken things to mend, for new roots to grow where old ones had withered. And yet, in this quiet moment, Lu could not help but wonder about the nature of time itself. How much of the world was shaped by the events of the past? How much of the present was the product of those who had come before? their actions rippling outward like the waves on the shore, and how much of the future was already written, as if the land itself knew the shape of what was to come. The sun's light continued to spread, touching the sea, the sky, the land, painting the world with the warmth of new beginnings. But it was not lost on Lu that even the dawn was fleeting. Each day, each moment, was a breath that would soon pass into memory. The world did not stay still. Time, like the tides, flowed onward, always changing, always moving. And yet, in the quiet of this morning, there was a softness in the air, as if the earth itself had learned something in the wake of the storm. Perhaps it was the lesson that, even in the most violent of struggles, there could be peace after. Perhaps it was the understanding that destruction did not always lead to the end, but to new growth. For the battle between Balor and Lu was not the first of its kind, nor would it be the last. The land had seen countless storms, and it would see countless more, but with each one it learned. It changed. It grew stronger. Lu paused, standing at the edge of the sea, the wind tugging at his hair and the salt of the ocean air filling his lungs. He looked out at the horizon, where the sky and the sea met in a soft blur of colour. It was a boundary, a place where the world seemed to end, yet where all things flowed together. The sea, the land, the sky, each one separate, yet each one part of the same whole. The waves, too, seemed to move in a cycle, rising and falling, endlessly shifting from chaos to calm. It was the rhythm of the world, the constant ebb and flow of forces beyond the understanding of mortals and gods alike. In the stillness, Luke thought of Balor, of the great eye that had cast such a long shadow over the land. He had faced his grandfather in the heart of the storm, and yet now, as the quiet filled the world, he could not help but wonder, what had Balor truly feared? Was it only the fall of his reign, or was it something deeper, a fear of the inevitability of time, of change, of the passage from one age to another? The Fomorians, in their monstrous forms, had represented one force of the world, the untamed, the chaotic, the relentless push of nature that could not be controlled. They had ruled by force, by the terror of Balor's evil eye, by the sheer weight of their presence. But even they had succumbed to time, even they had fallen. The Tuatha De Danann too had once been rulers of the land, their power great, their light shining bright. But in the end, they too had been forced into exile, their light dimming beneath the shadow of the Fomorians. And now, with Balor's fall, they were left to rebuild, to find their place in a world that had shifted beneath their feet. Lug understood this now, understood the endless cycle of creation and destruction that wove the tapestry of the world. The storm had come, and it had gone. The night had passed, and the dawn had broken, but it would not stay. Time, like the sea, was never still. It could not be. He turned away from the shore, his footsteps soft upon the earth. There was work to be done. The land needed healing. The broken pieces of the world needed to be restored. But there was no rush. Time would take care of it, just as it had taken care of all things before. The sun would rise again tomorrow. The winds would blow. The tides would shift. And in the quiet moments between all of this, the world would continue, always moving forward, always changing. For Lug knew this. Nothing, not even gods or monsters, could stand still forever. Even in the moments of stillness, time was moving. And so, with the quiet understanding that he was but a part of the ever-turning wheel of fate, he walked on, letting the earth guide him, letting the winds carry him forward. The sun climbed higher in the sky, its light soft but persistent, painting the world in hues of gold and amber. Yet, despite the beauty of the day, the quiet that had descended upon the land felt fragile, like the calm before another storm. Lu could feel it, deep in the bones of the earth, the subtle shift of power and purpose. The cycle of creation and destruction had not ended with the fall of Balor, nor would it ever truly end. It was a thread woven through the fabric of the world, stretching far beyond the reach of gods and men. As Lu moved deeper into the heart of the land, the earth beneath his feet seemed to whisper of things long forgotten, of memories buried beneath the weight of time. The land was healing, yes, but it was also remembering the weight of all that had passed before, and the shadows that still lingered in the corners of the world. These shadows were not the monsters of the past. nor the tyrants that had once held sway over the land. No, these shadows were more subtle, more insidious. They were the remnants of the past, the fragments of lost glory, the quiet fears that whispered in the dark corners of the earth. Lugh, though still young in many ways, understood this. He had seen it in the eyes of those who had fought in the storm, in the souls of those who had faced the greatest trials. Even in victory there was a quiet sense of loss, a recognition that nothing could ever be truly restored, that every victory came at the cost of something that could not be reclaimed. The Tuatha De Danann, who had once ruled the land in light and joy, now found themselves scattered, their lands broken, their spirits tired. They were not defeated in body, but their hearts had been worn down by the weight of their centuries-long struggle. They had long outlasted the reign of the Fomorians, but the price of survival had not been small. And as for Lu, he too carried the weight of what had come before, the burden of prophecy, of fate, of the moment when he had been called to stand against Balor and break the power of the evil eye. But even as the sun rose on this new day, he could not escape the truth that lingered in the shadows. For with every dawn there was another dusk. With every victory there was another loss. In the distance the land stretched out before him, rolling hills dotted with ancient stones and forgotten temples. The air was thick with the scent of earth and salt, the very lifeblood of the land. The quiet hum of life, the sound of birds in the trees, the rustle of leaves, the low murmur of the sea against the shore, spoke of a world in balance, yet teetering on the edge of change. The shadows that lingered in the corners of the land were not to be ignored. They were the reminders of what had passed and the whispers of what might still come. Lugh knew that his path was far from over. The world was not yet fully healed, and the forces of time and fate were still at work. There were still those who would seek to fill the void left by Balor's fall, to seize the power that had been lost. Even as the Fomorians scattered and the Tuatha De Danann began the slow process of rebuilding, there were others watching, waiting for their moment. It was the way of the world. Those who came after would always seek to claim what had been taken from them. The battle between light and shadow, between order and chaos, would never cease. It was the ebb and flow of life itself. But Lugh also understood that he was not alone in this. Though he carried the weight of the prophecy, the burden of his grandfather's legacy, he was not the only one who had a role to play in the world's unfolding story. The Tuatha De Danann, though broken, still held the power of the gods within them, and the earth itself, with its ancient stones and deep roots, still held the memory of the ages. The land was not defined by the battles fought upon it, nor by the gods who walked upon it, but by the very fabric of life that intertwined all things. The shadows, the light, the storm and the calm, they were all part of the same dance, the same rhythm that carried the world forward. As Lugh walked through the quiet fields, the sun now high in the sky, he paused for a moment to listen. The wind had shifted, carrying with it a new sound, a faint, distant whisper. It was not the voice of the sea, nor the hum of the earth. It was something else, something old, something buried deep within the land, a reminder that even in the quietest moments, the shadows lingered, waiting for their time. The land itself, it seemed, was alive with memory. Its ancient stones, its deep forests, its wild shores, they all carried the weight of time, and though the light of the sun bathed the earth, it could not banish the shadows entirely. They were always there, hiding just out of sight, waiting for the right moment to emerge. And in that moment, as Lugh stood amidst the quiet fields, he understood something that had eluded him before. The shadows were not something to fear. They were part of the world's balance, part of the cycle that had always been. For every dawn there must be a dusk, for every light there must be a shadow. The storm had passed, but the shadow it had cast would not disappear. It would only change, shift, and grow in a new form. The world was never static. It was always moving, always shifting, and in this constant movement, the land would continue to evolve, to find its balance. Lugh took a deep breath, feeling the weight of time settle upon him like the earth itself. The cycle had not ended. It had only shifted, and with it, his role was not yet complete. He turned once more to the horizon, where the sky met the land, where the world's pulse beat strongest. The wind whispered of what lay ahead, of the shadows yet to come, and of the light that would rise to meet them. The land stretched out before Lu, vast and timeless. The hills rolled like waves across the earth, their soft curves a reminder of the slow, patient passage of ages. The wind, carrying with it the scent of distant rain, whispered through the tall grasses, stirring the ancient trees that lined the horizon. Beneath his feet the earth hummed with a quiet pulse, as if it too had felt the weight of the storm, the clash of gods, and now sought to restore its balance. Lug felt the shift in the air, a subtle current, a song of sorts rising from the depths of the land. It was not a song sung by any voice he could hear, but a song woven into the very fabric of the earth itself. It was the song of memory, the song of life, of the eternal cycle that stretched far beyond the struggles of gods and men. The earth had witnessed countless storms, storms of war, storms of change, storms that shaped the world in ways that were often invisible to the eye. Yet, for all the violence that had passed, there was a gentle reminder in this moment. The land was still, and it was waiting for the seeds of the future to take root. The storm had left its mark, yes, but it had also cleared the way for new growth. Lug closed his eyes for a moment, breathing in the deep, rich scent of the earth, of moss and fallen leaves, of the salt carried from the sea. The land was alive, and he could feel it beneath his skin. There was no rush, no pressing need to move forward in haste. Time, like the tides, would carry everything to where it needed to go. For now, the stillness was enough. It was then that he noticed something. The distant hills were no longer just hills, but a line of figures, silent, almost ethereal, moving through the fog that had begun to roll over the land. They were the Tuatha De Danann, though different now, not as they once were, but as shadows of their former selves. These gods, who had once been full of light and glory, now moved like remnants of a dream, fading at the edges, yet still present, still holding on to their place in the world. They did not speak, not with words, but with a quiet understanding that hung between them, like the lingering notes of a song that had already ended. Their eyes, once bright with the fire of creation, now seemed distant, their faces worn with the weight of time. Yet in their presence Luke felt something stir within him, a deep recognition, a sense of connection that went beyond words. These were his kin, his people, the very forces of the earth and sky, of light and darkness. They had witnessed the rise and fall of ages, and they would witness the next one as well. As the figures of the Tuatha De Danann approached, Luke felt no fear. Instead, there was a quiet reverence, a sense of peace that settled over him like the dawn mist. The storm was gone, the battle fought, and now there was only the quiet song of the world unfolding, of time moving onward. One of the figures stepped forward, a woman with hair like woven silver, her eyes deep as the night sky. She was the oldest of them all, the one whose name was whispered in the winds and sung in the songs of the bards. She looked at Luch, and in her gaze there was both recognition and sorrow, a recognition of the child of prophecy, and sorrow for the weight he now carried. "You have fulfilled the prophecy, Lu," she said, her voice soft like the rustling of leaves in an autumn breeze. "But the world is not yet whole. There is still much that must be done." Luke nodded, though he knew there was little for him to say. Her words, though gentle, carried a weight that settled deep within him, like the very bones of the earth. The Tuatha De Danann were not yet ready to reclaim the world, not yet ready to restore it to its former glory. The land, though quiet now, was still scarred, still marked by the battles that had passed, and he was still only a part of the cycle, one piece in a greater tapestry that was yet to be completed. "The storm has passed," Luke said, his voice carrying across the stillness, "but the shadows remain. They will always remain." The woman nodded. "Yes, the shadows are not to be feared. They are part of the world's balance, but it is true, Luke. There will always be new storms, new shadows, new cycles to face. That is the way of the world, the way of time. You have brought light to the darkness, but light and shadow must coexist. They always have, and they always will." Her words, though soft, held a timeless truth. Lug had understood it in part before, but now, standing before these gods, hearing the quiet hum of the earth beneath him, he felt it in his very soul. The world was not made of light alone. It was made of light and shadow, of creation and destruction, of the ebb and flow of time itself. "You are the sun, Lu," the woman continued, "but the sun does not shine without the night, and you," she paused, her gaze softening, "you must learn that, for your light will not always be enough to banish the darkness. You must learn to walk with it, to understand it, for only then can you truly bring balance to the world." Lu looked at the woman, at the figures behind her, and for a moment he saw in them not just gods, but beings who had lived through the rise and fall of worlds, who had seen the dance of creation and destruction play out over and over again. They were both the light and the shadow, the song and the silence. "I will learn," Lu said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of gods and mortals alike. The woman smiled, though it was a sad, knowing smile. "You will. But know this, Lu, the world is always changing. The shadows you face today will not be the same as the shadows you face tomorrow. The light you bring will not always be enough, but that is the beauty of it. That is the song of the land." And with those words she turned away, her figure slowly fading into the mist, the others following her, fading like the last notes of a song that had been sung long ago. Lug stood there, watching them go, feeling the quiet weight of their words settle upon him like the earth itself. The wind shifted again, carrying with it the scent of rain, and in the distance the sea began to hum a quiet lullaby. The shadows, though faint, seemed to stretch and shift across the land as if waiting for their time. And somewhere, deep in the heart of the earth, the song of the world continued, a song that would never end, but would always change, always grow. Lug turned, his heart heavy but his step steady. The world was not yet whole, but it would be. Time, like the tides, would carry it forward, one wave at a time. The day drifted on, and the sun moved slowly across the sky, casting long shadows that stretched across the land. The earth, still quiet, seemed to exhale with each passing moment, as if it had drawn a deep breath, and was now allowing the dust of the past to settle. The winds, once fierce with the fury of battle, now moved softly through the grasses, their touch gentle like a lullaby whispered to a restless child. The land had not forgotten what it had endured, nor could it. The weight of centuries of gods and mortals, of war and peace, lay upon it like a soft, silent burden. Lu continued his journey through the land, his footsteps slow, purposeful. The air around him was filled with the quiet hum of the earth, the song of life that had never truly ceased, but now seemed to speak to him more clearly than before. It was a song of cycles, of seasons turning, of the endless dance between the light and the dark. It was a song that could only be heard by those who listened deeply, who understood the rhythms of the world, who knew that every moment was part of a greater whole. He passed through fields that were still marked by the scars of battle. The earth turned over, the soil rich and dark with the remains of the old world. Yet even here, in the place where the Fomorians had once ruled, new growth was rising. Tiny shoots of green pushed through the earth, fragile yet determined, reaching for the sun. The land, though scarred, was not dead. It was healing. The wounds of the past would never disappear, but the world was finding a way to move forward, to build something new atop the ruins of what had come before. As he walked, Lug reflected on the words of the elder of the Tuatha De Danann. The shadows, yes, they would always remain. They were the inevitable counterpart to the light, and he, Lug, the Sunbringer, would have to learn to walk with both, the light that he could carry and the darkness that was part of the world's balance. It was not a burden he could simply cast away. It was part of him, as much as the fire that burned in his chest, as much as the sword he carried by his side. He understood now that the world was not something to be conquered, not something to be controlled. It was something to be lived with, to be understood in all its complexity. The land, the sea, the sky, each held its own rhythm, its own song. And though his place in the world was great, it was only one part of the greater whole. The Tuatha De Danann were not the only gods. The Fomorians were not the only monsters, and Lug was not the only force of light. There was more to this world than any one being could understand, and the shadows that danced in the corners of the earth were as much a part of its fabric as the light that shone from the heavens. In the distance he saw the edge of the forest, a place that seemed both familiar and strange. It was a place where the trees grew tall and thick, their branches reaching out like ancient hands, twisted and gnarled with age. It was a place that held memories, both sweet and sorrowful, memories of those who had come before him. He could feel them there, their presence lingering in the silence, in the air thick with the scent of moss and earth. This forest had once been a place of great power, a place where the gods had gathered, where great decisions had been made. It was here, in the depths of this place, that Lugh had once been hidden from the wrath of Balor. It was here that his destiny had begun, long before he had ever drawn his sword. Now, as he stood at its edge, he could sense something stirring within the trees, a quiet stirring, as if the forest itself was awakening, remembering its ancient purpose. He stepped forward, his feet sinking slightly into the rich earth, the leaves crunching softly beneath his steps. The air grew cooler as he entered the shade of the trees, the light dimming as the canopy above thickened. It was here, in this place, that time seemed to slow, where the world of mortals and gods met in the quiet spaces between. The deeper he went, the more the air seemed to hum with a strange energy. It was not the sharp power of battle, nor the brilliance of the sun. It was something older, something deeper, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. Lugh could feel it within him, a pulse that matched the rhythm of his own breath. The land, it seemed, was speaking to him. In the distance he saw a figure standing at the heart of the forest, a figure cloaked in shadow, their face hidden beneath a hood. They stood still, unmoving, as if waiting for him. Lugh's steps slowed as he approached, the quiet energy of the forest pressing in around him, a reminder of the long history that had passed through this place. The figure spoke without turning, their voice soft, almost a whisper. "You have come, Lugh, the child of prophecy, the bringer of light. But you have learned that light alone will not guide the world. It is the shadows that will shape you, as much as the sun will." Lugh stood still, listening. The voice seemed to resonate within him, its words carrying the weight of centuries, of all the wisdom and sorrow that had passed through this land. The forest was alive with the memories of those who had come before, and their voices, though silent, were still there, woven into the fabric of the trees, the earth, the air. The figure turned, their hood falling back to reveal a face that was both familiar and unfamiliar. It was a face from long ago, an ancestor perhaps, or a forgotten god. Their eyes were old, ancient with the weight of the ages, and their gaze held a quiet understanding, as though they had seen everything the world had to offer, both light and shadow. "The world you walk in is one of constant change, Lo," the figure continued, their voice gentle. "You have faced the storm and defeated its greatest power, but you have only begun to understand the nature of the world. Time moves forward, but it is not linear. It spirals, circling back on itself, like the eternal dance of light and dark. The shadows you face today will not be the same as the ones you face tomorrow, but they will always be with you, and you will learn to walk with them." Lugh nodded, understanding now. The storm had passed, yes, but the dance between light and shadow would never cease. He had learned to face the storm, to face his grandfather, but he had not yet fully learned the art of walking through the shadows that remained. In the stillness of the forest, Lugh stood, feeling the weight of the world around him. He had been called to this place, to this moment, but he knew that his journey was far from over. The shadows were still there, waiting, but they would not define him. They were only part of the dance, and it was time for him to learn its rhythm. The wind began to shift, the leaves rustling softly as though the trees themselves were whispering their approval. The figure before him smiled, a soft, knowing smile, and then slowly began to fade into the mist. And as Lugh stood there, the pulse of the earth steady beneath his feet, he understood. The song of the land, the dance of light and shadow would continue, and he would walk it, one step at a time. The forest whispered its quiet song as Lugh stood in its depths, the pulse of the earth beneath his feet steady and rhythmic. The shadows that had once seemed so ominous were now familiar companions, neither to be feared nor ignored. They were part of the world, like the breath of the wind, like the ebb and flow of the tides, necessary, inevitable, and full of their own quiet purpose. In this ancient place, the air was thick with the scent of age-old trees, of damp earth and moss, and the lingering echoes of forgotten times. Lugh could feel the presence of the land deep in his bones. This was not the land of the Fomorians, Not the land of the Tuatha De Danann alone. It was the land of all things, of gods, of mortals, of beasts, and of the wind itself. The trees, though silent, were alive with memory, with knowledge that stretched back beyond time itself. And here, at the heart of the forest, Lu could almost hear their voices, the stories of those who'd walked before him, their struggles, their triumphs, their losses. He closed his eyes, letting the stillness of the forest settle around him like a gentle blanket. It was a stillness that was not empty but full of the quiet hum of life, of time passing without haste. He had fought the storm, he had faced the shadows, but now, in this moment, there was no need for such things. The world was not in need of warriors or gods. It was in need of listening. And so, Lug listened. He listened to the rustling of the leaves as the wind played through the branches, to the distant call of birds, to the soft murmur of the earth itself. He could feel the land shifting, changing, growing. The rhythm of life moved steadily as it always had through cycles of birth, death, and rebirth. The land had seen countless storms, countless battles, but it had also seen countless quiet moments like this. Moments where the light and the shadow could coexist in peace, where the earth could rest and heal. It was in these moments that the true strength of the world was revealed, not in the clash of swords, not in the fury of battle, but in the quiet spaces between. The land was not defined by its storms alone. It was defined by its ability to endure them, to heal, to grow, and to continue. Luke's mind drifted back to the figures of the Tuatha De Danann, those who had walked before him, who had given so much of themselves to protect the land. Their power had faded, yes, but they were not gone. They were here, in the trees, in the wind, in the very earth beneath his feet. They had not left the world. They had become part of it. They were in the land's memory, in its song, in its silence. He opened his eyes and looked up at the sky. The clouds were now scattered, no longer the thick, oppressive masses that had once loomed over the world. The sun, though still hidden behind a veil of mist, sent its light through in gentle beams, soft like the first light of dawn after a long sleepless night, and in this light, the land shimmered with possibility. Lug knew now that his journey was not over. The storm of war had passed, the prophecy fulfilled, but there was still much to be done. Not all of the shadows had been faced, not all of the wounds healed. There was a time for battle and there was a time for rest, and now the world needed both. It needed the strength of warriors, yes, but it also needed the patience of those who knew how to listen, who understood that healing could not be rushed. Time, like the forest, would take care of things in its own way, in its own time. But there was one thing Lu now understood more deeply than ever before. The world was not a place of perpetual struggle. The land was not shaped solely by the forces of light or darkness, of creation or destruction. It was shaped by the quiet moments, the moments when all things came together, when light and shadow, sun and moon, life and death found their balance. The land thrived in this balance, in the quiet dance between the two. Luke turned away from the forest and began to walk again, his steps slower now, more mindful. The path before him was not one of battle, nor of prophecy, but of understanding. He did not walk alone. He walked with the land, with the memories of those who had come before him, with the shadows and the light that would always be part of the world. The wind tugged at his hair, and he welcomed it. The breeze was soft, carrying with it the scent of the sea, the taste of salt and earth. It reminded him that, though the storms of the past had passed, the world would always move forward, and in this movement there was beauty. The sun broke through the mist fully now, casting its light across the land. The grasses shimmered with dew, the trees stood tall and proud, their leaves fluttering softly in the breeze. The quiet hum of life returned, the world settling back into its rhythm. The shadows, too, were present, faint, lingering in the corners, but not to be feared. They were simply part of the world's fabric, as much a part of the dance as the sun itself. And in this moment, Luke knew that the world would continue, always moving, always changing, always finding its balance. There would be new battles, new storms, new shadows to face. But there would also be moments like this, moments of peace, where the land could rest and grow, where time could unfold without haste. Luck paused for a moment, looking out at the horizon, where the land met the sky, and he felt the weight of everything that had passed and everything yet to come. The world was both vast and small, both ancient and new, both light and dark, and he, Lu, was a part of it, a part of the cycle, the dance, the song that would never end. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the breeze wash over him, and when he opened them again, he saw not just the land before him, but the entire world, its past, its present, its future, all woven together in an endless, timeless dance. And so, he continued his walk, one step at a time, knowing that each step, though small, was part of something far greater than he could ever fully understand. The light of the sun, now fully risen, bathed the earth in its golden warmth, casting long shadows upon the land, soft and stretching like the quiet pull of time itself. The sky, once heavy with the weight of storm, was now clear, pale blue and endless. The breeze that whispered through the leaves seemed to hum with contentment, a lullaby sung by the earth to cradle the world in peace. The distant sea, though once wild and restless, now sighed in gentle waves, its rhythm slow and calm, as if it too had found its moment of rest. Lug's steps had slowed, though he had not yet stopped. He walked with a new understanding, a quiet certainty that the world would move with or without his intervention, that time would carry all things forward. He was but a part of this vast, endless dance, a thread woven into the tapestry of creation, destruction, and rebirth. The prophecy had been fulfilled. The storm had come, and it had passed, leaving only the quiet residue of what had once been. In the distance he saw the hills that stretched toward the horizon, the familiar landscape of Ireland, once again bathed in the soft light of a new dawn. It was a land reborn, not through force, but through patience, through the quiet healing that comes with time. The wounds of the world had not been erased, but they had begun to close, and in their place, new life had begun to emerge. The earth, like the sea, was in constant motion, but now there was peace. A peace that was not the absence of struggle, but the acceptance of its place in the world. As Lu stood there, his heart full yet light, he could feel the presence of those who had come before him, the Tuatha De Danann, the Fomorians, the gods, the mortals, all of them, woven into the fabric of the world. They had shaped the land for better or for worse, and now they rested in the earth, in the sky, in the sea. Their stories, their struggles, their triumphs and defeats had become part of the land's memory. The land had learned from them, and in turn it had taught them the same lessons. Lessons of balance, of light and shadow, of creation and destruction. Luck turned to face the setting sun, its warm light casting a gentle glow over the land. The world was still, the air filled with the soft murmurs of nature. It was in these moments that Lu felt the true pulse of the earth, the quiet beat that could only be heard when one stood still, when one listened with the heart, not just the ears. The shadows, though ever present, were not to be feared. They were part of the world's eternal cycle, as much a part of the dance as the light itself. The light too was not to be worshipped or chased after, for it too would fade in time. What mattered was the balance, the rhythm that connected all things. Light, dark, storm, peace. Each one had its place in the cycle, and it was the cycle itself that mattered. As Luke watched the sun dip lower on the horizon, he understood that the world would continue to turn, and with it, so too would the stories of the gods, of mortals, of all things that walk the earth. There would be new heroes, new battles, new prophecies, but they would all be part of the same great rhythm. There was no end, only the quiet return of the earth to itself, the constant ebb and flow of life. And so, as the first stars began to appear in the sky, Luke felt the weight of time settle around him like a soft cloak. He was part of something vast, something eternal. His role had been played, but the play itself would continue, carried forward by the winds, the sea, and the quiet song of the land. And as he stood there, beneath the rising stars, the world felt at peace. Lur closed his eyes for a moment, letting the cool night air wash over him. The earth, the sea, the sky, they were all one. He could feel the whispers of the land, the soft hum of the past, the present, and the future all interwoven. And in that moment he knew that his journey, though it had brought him here, was not truly over. The story of the world was far from finished. It would continue, as it always had, in ways both grand and quiet, in ways both light and dark. As the stars began to twinkle brighter, the moon rising slowly in the east, Luke turned away from the horizon and began to walk once more, his steps soft upon the earth, steady, sure. The night was his now, the peace of the world wrapping around him like a blanket as time moved forward endlessly into the quiet dawn of a new day. And so, as the sea rests, may your thoughts find rest as well.